Somewhere at sea in 2027, a single passenger will pay just under $840,000. Not for a private jet, not for a yacht, but for one cabin, on one ship, for 140 nights. That's not the cost of the entire cruise line's most expensive sailing. That's the price of a single suite. For one guest, sleeping on a mattress, that alone retails for more than $200,000. And somewhere else entirely, on a different ship, an even larger suite has just claimed the title of the biggest, most expensive cabin in cruise ship history, nearly 9,000 square feet, spread across 2 full levels, starting at $25,000 a night. So what exactly does that kind of money buy you in the middle of the ocean? Original artwork, a private sauna, a car and driver waiting in literally every port. Let's step inside. How a simple cabin became a private residence. It's worth pausing on how recent this entire category of luxury actually is. For most of cruising's history, even the best cabin on a ship was still fundamentally just a slightly bigger, slightly nicer version of everyone else's room. A larger bed, maybe a small sitting area, perhaps a better view. The idea of a cabin functioning as an actual multi-room residence, complete with its own dedicated staff and private wellness facilities, simply didn't exist in mainstream cruising a few decades ago. That began to change as cruise lines increasingly competed not on destinations, which are largely shared across the industry, but on the exclusivity of the experience itself. Once one line introduced a suite with its own butler and private dining, competitors had little choice but to respond, and each subsequent generation of ships pushed the concept further: larger footprints, more private amenities, and increasingly elaborate design details borrowed directly from 5-star hotels and private residences on land. The result, playing out over roughly the last 15 years, has been an accelerating arms race at the very top of the cruise industry, with each new flagship vessel attempting to outdo the last, not just in size, but in sheer inventiveness. And that arms race is precisely what led to the suite currently holding the industry's crown, the suite that's held the crown for years. For nearly a decade, one suite has consistently topped every industry list of the most expensive accommodations at sea: the Regent Suite, found aboard Regent 7 Seas Cruises' most luxurious ships. Depending on the exact vessel and sailing, nightly rates for this suite have ranged from around $10,000 up toward $20,000, with one 9-night Mediterranean sailing carrying a brochure price of just over $110,000 per person. Spanning more than 4,000 square feet on some ships, the suite includes 2 full bedrooms, a private balcony large enough to include its own whirlpool, and 3 separate walk-in closets. But what genuinely sets it apart isn't the square footage. It's the in-suite spa retreat, a completely private wellness space built directly into the accommodation itself, featuring a personal sauna, a steam room, and a jetted tub, amenities normally reserved for an entire ship's shared spa deck, here existing behind a single guest's own locked door. What most passengers never realize is that the walls of this suite have, on certain sailings, been decorated with original Picasso artwork, and the bed itself is built around a handcrafted Swedish mattress, so exclusive that a single one retails for more than the cost of a luxury car. But even a suite this extraordinary is now facing a serious challenge to its throne. From a ship that hasn't even set sail yet, the new record that just shattered the old one. In 2025, Regent 7 Seas unveiled something that immediately rewrote the record books: the Skyview Regent Suite, debuting aboard the newly announced 7 Seas Prestige, arriving in late 2026. At nearly 8,800 square feet, spread across 2 levels, with a private balcony alone measuring over 3,700 square feet, it instantly became the largest suite ever built into a cruise ship, at a starting price of $25,000 per night. The design leans heavily into custom architecture rather than simply maximizing space for its own sake: soaring skylights, sculptural leather wall elements, and an entire aesthetic built specifically around uninterrupted ocean views from nearly every angle of the suite. The ship carrying it will maintain a crew-to-guest ratio of roughly 1 crew member for every 1.3 guests, meaning the level of personal attention available to every passenger aboard, let alone the guest in this particular suite, rivals almost anything else at sea. What most people never realize is that a suite this size isn't simply an oversized cabin. It functions closer to a fully staffed private residence that happens to be floating, with amenities and square footage that would be considered spacious even as a permanent home on land. And yet, surprisingly, sheer size and price aren't actually the only ways cruise lines have chosen to compete for the title of most extravagant suite at sea, when bigger doesn't mean better. While Regent has focused on scale, other cruise lines have taken the ultra-luxury suite concept in a completely different direction, one built specifically around families rather than solitary indulgence. Royal Caribbean's Ultimate Family Townhouse, debuting aboard some of the largest ships ever built, spans 3 full levels, and reimagines what an at-sea family accommodation can even look like, complete with its own indoor slide, a dedicated Lego wall, and an air hockey table built directly into the suite. Disney has taken a similarly bold swing with its Tower Suite, priced around $14,000 total for a 2-night sailing, working out to roughly $7,000 per night per person on one of the shortest, most exclusive itineraries in the company's fleet. What most passengers never realize is that these suites aren't simply competing on price or square footage against Regent's flagship offering. They're targeting an entirely different kind of luxury altogether. One where the ultimate indulgence isn't quiet solitude, but an entire private playground built for a family who never has to leave their own 3-story cabin to have the time of their lives. And once you understand that shift, an entirely new category of cruise ship luxury becomes visible, one built not around a single suite, but an entire hidden neighborhood. The ship within the ship. Beyond any single suite, several major cruise lines have built what's known in the industry as a ship-within-a-ship concept, an entirely separate, gated section of the vessel reserved exclusively for suite guests, complete with its own pool, restaurant, lounge, and sometimes even its own separate check-in process entirely apart from the rest of the ship. MSC Cruises calls its version the Yacht Club. Celebrity calls its version the Retreat. Norwegian offers something similar through an area known as the Haven. Even at what's considered the more accessible end of this category, guests have described paying around $1,000 a night for one of these suites, and immediately noticing how dramatically different the experience felt compared to a standard cabin closer to a boutique hotel than anything resembling typical cruise ship travel. What most passengers never realize is that these ship-within-a-ship enclaves exist specifically to solve a problem money alone can't fix on a traditional cruise, no matter how expensive your suite is. If you're still sharing a pool deck, elevator, and buffet line with several thousand other guests, it never quite feels genuinely private. These gated sections solve that by rebuilding an entire miniature luxury resort, quietly nested inside the larger, more crowded ship surrounding it. The economics of this arrangement are, in their own way, genuinely clever. Rather than building an entirely separate, standalone luxury vessel, cruise lines instead construct one section of an existing megaship specifically for their highest-paying guests, letting that smaller population enjoy a private restaurant, a quieter pool, and dedicated staff, while the ship as a whole still benefits from the economies of scale that come with carrying several thousand additional passengers elsewhere on board. It's luxury and mass market efficiency somehow coexisting within the exact same hull. But no matter how private the neighborhood or luxurious the suite itself, virtually every one of these experiences is ultimately built around the same single defining feature, the one thing every suite actually sells. Strip away the Picasso paintings, the private saunas, and the multi-level layouts, and nearly every one of these ultra-premium cruise suites is really selling the exact same thing: a dedicated butler, personally assigned to a single guest or family, capable of arranging literally anything from unpacking luggage to securing a private car and driver waiting at every single port of call. That single detail, the presence of one person whose entire job, for the length of the voyage, is anticipating your needs before you voice them, is what separates these suites from an expensive hotel room. A hotel, no matter how luxurious, still expects you to come to it. These suites are built around the opposite philosophy entirely. The service comes to you instantly, constantly, for the entire length of the journey. What most passengers never realize is that this single relationship between one guest and one dedicated staff member is often described by past guests as the most memorable part of the entire experience, more than the artwork, more than the private spa, more than the $25,000 nightly rate itself. Why people actually pay this much? At the surface, none of this makes obvious financial sense. A suite costing more per night than most people's monthly rent. On a ship that's also, technically, carrying several thousand other passengers, paying a fraction of that price just a few decks away. But that's precisely the point. These suites aren't selling transportation, or even really selling square footage. They're selling total insulation from the ordinary experience of cruising altogether, the lines, the crowds, the shared buffets, the noise. For an amount of money that would buy an actual home in most parts of the world, these suites promise something almost impossible to replicate any other way. The sensation of owning your own private, floating residence, staffed entirely for you, sailing to a new country every few days, without ever once feeling like you're sharing the experience with anyone at all. So the next time you see a photograph of a suite with its own sauna, its own art collection, or its own 3-story slide, remember what's actually being sold behind that price tag. It was never really about the room. It's about disappearing, for a week or for 140 nights, into a version of the ocean that most of the world will never even know exists. And somewhere out there right now, that exact scene is unfolding. A butler is polishing a doorknob nobody else will ever touch. A private chef is plating a dish for an audience of one. A car is idling quietly at a foreign dock, waiting for a single passenger who hasn't even finished breakfast yet. For that one guest, in that one suite, the ocean has stopped being something they're sharing with anyone else at all.